morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our 22nd episode of the Blowback Roundtable. It is just Carlo and Ben, and I shouldn't say just because, we are a very formidable panel. I can tell you that from
It's
what people have said.
a little triangle table today.
A triangle table. Sorry we put you on the bottom, Ben. I hope you're not offended.
I'm good.
So, first off, we were going to discuss some domestic political issues. Last week, I was surprised to find out that they did pass a budget. They didn't have a governmental shutdown. I was really thinking that was for sure going to happen. And then this week, either yesterday or the day before, it was very recently, the Republican Speaker of the House got kicked out, and I think they haven't named a replacement yet.
No,
Have they
but
named
can
a
I
replacement?
can I maybe set it up because I'm the European and I honestly don't really understand these things. I'm so remote from this. I understand what Makuris is talking about it, but he's also remote. So what I got was, the budget didn't pass, but they had this 45-day stopgap measure that actually passed without Ukraine aid. And the next thing I heard was this McCarthy man, who is a Republican, another leader. What is it? Leader of the House, the Speaker of the House.
Speaker of the House. Yeah.
He was ousted by mostly Democrats, but also some Republicans with some connection to the Ukraine aid that might be procedural. And the next thing I read was that Nancy Pelosi, who's been Speaker of the House earlier, was ousted from her little office or something in the same place by this Patrick McHenry, who is the acting speaker. He was on the staff of McCarthy. And I was like, okay, Europe, I know since then has got a huge panic. Like, what if Ukraine doesn't get funded? I'm pretty convinced that it will get funded. But tell me, what is this about? What's going on?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, sort of. Look, Matt Gaetz played McCarthy brilliantly. McCarthy only got elected Speaker of the House on the 15th round, I believe it was.
Gaetz is also Republican, right? Gaetz.
Yes,
Gaetz.
yes. And part of the deal was that one person in the House, which has over 400 members, I think it's 435, something roughly like that, can bring up a motion to get the Speaker tossed. And so Gaetz set up McCarthy beautifully, and he succeeded in getting him tossed. I don't really know the ins and outs. I know that McCarthy lied about a lot of what. Well, they all lie.
Of course, they're politicians.
Made promises that he did not intend to keep, even when he made them. But the notion of the Ukraine aid. It was supposed to be included inside the general U.S. budget, which is just full of all kinds of pork. So, I mean, it's just basically a gift to big pharma, a gift to the military-industrial complex. We have
Citizens United,
all of that stuff.
What you have is legal lobbying, legal bribery, yeah.
And then they wanted to, I think it was $35 billion. A suggestion was made by the Gaetz, Green, Hawley contingent of Congress people, of House people, to have a separate allotment to Ukraine. And
that's the point, yeah.
And so, of course, the Biden administration doesn't want that. They don't care how much the American people suffer. They don't get for a rat's rectum about the American people. So they want to fund Ukraine because it's in their interest to keep the funding Ukraine because of domestic, the military-industrial complex and all the other things that are associated. Even the people that make MREs, like meals ready to eat, or whatever the Ukrainians are being forced to shove down their gullets as they're being slaughtered on the front.
Absolutely. But Carlo, help clear it up for me. I mean, Biden said as much today, by the way. It is in the interest of the United States to keep funding Ukraine. It's obviously going to be funded. He has other ways, I think he told one of the publications, by different means, but he didn't. I think it was Reuters. He didn't elaborate the other means by which to fund. But here's the point. I saw the victory rally in the House. the speech of this Gates fellow.
Yes, yeah.
Very populist. It was when my constituents asked me what I sent for Ukraine, I want to have a separate bill so I can show them I didn't, and I did, and it was very populist. You can boo all you want, but it's going to be a changed world. Obviously, they're politicians. I mean, they lie for a living, but it was very populist. But what's the reality? I know there's a struggle here.
Go ahead, Billy Bob. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I mean, and I'm not an expert on the procedural issues that went into the removal of McCarthy or on the passing of the budget. Like, I'm not going to be able to speak to that very good. But basically, what always happens is the opposition party, so the party that's not in power, so the Republicans aren't in power, and they're seeing these political weapons that they can utilize. So they know that the Ukraine war isn't popular, especially after the $700 per person in Maui. And so that's a populist message that they can hit home to, to benefit themselves. Now, like Carla was saying prior to the show, that doesn't mean they're principled. That doesn't mean on principle they're against the war or that they're for the American people. That's the farthest thing from the truth. But
what you're saying is they're going to play these cards now because the opportune time, because of basically the unpopularity among the population of this.
Yeah, they're out of power, and they can use these cards, to their to their advantage, to their electoral advantage, and forcing the Democrats to be the party of the unpopular war on Ukraine. And to be the party of, hey, we think that Ukrainians need to be treated better than Americans. And that's not going to go well with the American public. But it's politics, right? It's not based on principle. I mean, that's the first point I wanted to make. There might be a few members of Congress that are on principle opposed to, our military interventionism. And you could suggest that, what's his name's son? Rand Paul.
Rand Paul, yeah.
He may be principled because, he does speak out against war, even when the Republicans were in control and starting the wars. But if the Republicans do get power, these voices on the outskirts aren't strong enough to keep the Republicans from doing the exact same thing that the Democrats are doing now.
Oh, yeah.
So
right now, they want to tie it to Biden, right? And the Democrats.
Yeah. Yes.
This is your shit. I see. Thank you for clearing that up.
But and what Billy Bob said is really important because these people, the Getzes and the Greens and that faction, they know they're a vast minority and they can't ultimately win. But they feel they can enhance their position. And I don't mean among their electorate. They don't care about their electorate anymore more than anyone else. But they can use that as leverage to get more funding for their district because the powers that be, the people that really control, I mean, after Citizens United, it's all money, 100% money. They'll give them something. This is your
the ultimate game, basically.
But when Ben said about Biden wanting to fund it, how is he going to fund it? Of course, I'm an old man and I worked a lot on Iran-Contra, and that's the first thing that came to my mind. And I said, well, Carlo, that's really far-fetched. I mean, Iran-Contra, Oliver North approached the Sultan of Brunei, and the Sultan of Brunei gave him enough money to fund the Contras when Congress wouldn't fund the Contras and all of that. And then the CIA got sucked in and big time because there was the three big CIA agents that got sucked in are huge. Ted Shackley, the blonde ghost, Tom Clines, and Dwayne Dewey Claridge. So it turned out to be a huge scandal, but it amounted to nothing. I thought it was like going to be the end of the world for the U.S. foreign policy empire, and nothing came of it. Nothing.
I hope it's different.
I mean, they were funding their criminal wars that were illegal under the
U.S. undeclared wars,
with selling drug money, to Americans in inner cities.
Yeah.
So you would think that would bring down a government, but not in this country because.
Yeah, I mean, if you bring it up in Europe, even among the learned, people just tell me what's a Contra, what's an Iran Contra. I hope in America, at least, they still know what they were.
No, They have no idea, and you can actually trace it back to Vietnam because during the Phoenix program, as Doug Valentine has pointed out 1,000 times, he's got a great book on the Phoenix program, is that drugs were being smuggled out of Vietnam, not only to America but to GIs in South Vietnam. We. I'll give you an anecdote. My wife and I were at a children's birthday party, and this is when we were doing our community access TV show here in DC in the 80s. And this guy comes up to us during the children's birthday party, and he says, "I watch your program. You're absolutely right about the drug smuggling. I was made to load heroin onto helicopters for Bang Pow and his drug people through the CIA's Phoenix program. Firsthand, I threw the sacks onto the helicopters." So
it didn't help that it was a children's birthday, but it's still
children's birthday party, and it happened over and over.
Well, there was a big scandal when drugs were smuggled in body bags. They were using body bags of dead soldiers, and drugs were in those body bags. And that was like, that's not a conspiracy theory. I mean, that's something that happened. Of course, they try and minimize the extent to which that took place. It was just a small thing, and it was just, a couple people. But they literally got busted smuggling drugs out of Vietnam in body bags. And then, the drugs were being sold in South Vietnam to American GIs because they're the ones that had cash. Like, the American GIs had way more money in Hanoi than your average, Vietnamese farmer. And so that was the consumer for the local market.
So to kind of round it out, to round it out, I lost my train of thought, but to round it out, the drugs, the drugs. Well, I lost my train of thought, but let me. It's so to talk about budgeting for it. It's not hard. It's not going to be hard for Biden to come up with the money. I mean, the CIA has what they call a black budget, and so they're budgeted like I don't know, $10, $12 billion a year. It used to be, way back in the day. But the black budget, nobody knows what it is, and nobody knows the source of it, and it's international drug smuggling.
Yeah, I mean, the Pentagon fails every audit.
That's why the CIA. I don't want to belabor this, but that's why the CIA was reluctant to give up Afghanistan, because they were growing poppy there. I mean, in the 2 years, that 2-year hiatus where the Taliban took over, they eradicated the poppy pot.
And now that you mentioned that, a lot of Europeans and a bunch of Americans like Lindsey Graham, one of the big cheerleaders for the war, are talking about it's going to be worse than the Afghanistan pullout. It's going to be a catastrophe. It's a death sentence to Taiwan. Somehow they bring it in. By the way, last week I watched Mao Ning, the spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, which is very high level. So real official stuff saying, well, you receive 5% of the basically raw industrial material that goes into fentanyl production in the US. And yet 80% of the drug consumption is your country. Sorry, that's not, I mean, most of the countries use it for agriculture, for other means. And I'm just wondering, with what you know about the previous, let's call them drug operations, I wonder what's going on today, in the same regard. Who knows? Because we have all seen the videos of those streets that look like from a zombie movie in big cities.
Okay, before let's touch on that, but I wanted to make one final point about the domestic politics. So I just want to point out, the Republicans are putting the spotlight on their fringe elements who are, populist, like the anti-war. They're being empowered, but it was the same thing when the Republicans were in power. The Democrats empowered their anti-war populists. And then when the Democrats come to power, they sideline their anti-war fringe, and they just run it as business as usual. And the same thing would happen if
they get co-opted, like Bernie praying for assistance for Ukraine, asking for it in the next congressional whatever.
Yeah, they show that they're two-faced. So they're giving good rhetoric. They're against the war in Ukraine, and they're sounding all populist, but that's what the opposition does, and that's what the Democratic opposition does when the Republicans are in power. That's what the Republicans do when the Democrats are in power. So you don't believe them. And even, the question then becomes, well, do they really believe that? Does Matt Gaetz on principle, is he a principled person? And it doesn't matter because, he doesn't form a majority. So whether or not he's truly principled is immaterial, because once the Democrats come to power, if he is serious about it, they're going to sideline him, and they'll probably get him voted out in the next election if he wants to push his principles.
I'm with you.
They're unprincipled. So with the drugs coming from,
I didn't mean to sideline to get into that sideline, but yeah.
No, it's a good topic. I mean, that's one of the mainstream narratives, anti-China narratives, is that China is just dumping fentanyl in the U.S. It's part of the CPCs. They call it what do they call it? They don't say CPC. They say
the CPC is a communist party. They say CCP because it reminds people of the Soviet Union.
They do it derogatorily, but they claim that it's part of a plot by the CCP to undermine America. It's one of their ways that they attack us, and why we need to hate them, because they flood our society with fentanyl. But you're exactly right. Because China develops the precursors, and that, CIA affiliated drug cartels buy those precursors from China, manufacture the meth, maybe in the United States, a lot of it probably, other places outside of the border, and then they ship it in. I mean, that's not China's fault. That's America's fault, right? It's America's fault that we don't provide good jobs and a good quality of life to people, and they feel that they have to turn to, opioids or fentanyl to deal with things. That's a whole nother issue about addiction and our over medication and our coping mechanisms that are not very healthy.
I didn't mean to sidetrack, but one thing has changed, and maybe Miss Olena Zelenskaya also contributed to this with her 1 million spending on Cartier jewelry while she was in New York. She also got the salesman fired. Was, okay, these politicians haven't really changed, but something, maybe the underlying mechanics, maybe the popular, what do you call these? The sentiments in America have changed, and they feel they have to be more populist, because a lot of that is happening in Europe. And I'm wondering if before the show, just for the viewers, we were talking about dollar store stories, because all three of us pretty much, we go in for the bargain nowadays because we're feeling the heat in all three places. And maybe that's turning some sane people about, what about us? It wasn't enough to have the Lahaina fire. It's not enough to have, we pay petrol prices pretty much doubled since Russia shut off the diesel exports. So Europe is not in good shape. Paris is dealing with bed bugs. The new Slovak guy, basically Minister Fico, Prime Minister, he got blackmailed by EU politicians that will expel your party from the European Socialist Coalition or something in the European Parliament.
You're going too fast.
You're going. I'm doing that.
I want to address the bed bugs. So is that like a nutritional objective? Is that about food?
It's not a Klaus Schwabian eats the bugs. It's actually a rampant problem right now in hotels, in living quarters, in everywhere in Paris. That's the latest story.
Okay, because it could have been a food program.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting there where it can be. Yeah, this time next year.
So, and you mentioned somebody being blackmailed. I did hear that the leader of the there was he got hit with a needle of something.
That's brand new.
Had some anaphylactic shock. Did you hear about that guy?
Yes, that's the leader
of the AfD, leader of the AfD.
Yeah, Alternative for Deutschland, the German party, who's looked to pretty much rake in the next election. By the way, there was huge protests in Berlin at the, when they were unified. I think it's called Nation Day or something. Enormous. We have short clips if we want to show it. But yeah, huge anger at NATO, at the government. There's signs saying, we're not afraid of Putin, we're afraid of you. And there's Olaf Scholz, there's Baerbock, there's Habeck and these guys. But the thing is, there's great unrest, I think, in Europe. What you mentioned was the AfD guy getting a needle attack is what we all, and that he's hospitalized. I don't know any more than that. Robert Fico, who got elected in Slovakia, before he got, the exit polls showed he's going to lose. And now he got blackmailed by European Parliament people saying, well, we're going to fuck your party out if you don't go along with Ukraine. Hungary is getting blackmailed. We can get I think, 13 billion euros they owe us from 3 to 4 years ago during the pandemia, if we stop our veto for the Ukraine aid. It's all or nothing right now. And the populace is in a huge uproar, pretty much all around the place.
So our topic of the show is the the writings on the wall. We didn't put handwriting. So the writings on the wall, and it's just the signs are becoming more clear and more obvious that there is no winning strategy for the West in Ukraine. And that's just becoming more and more obvious. And so that was the relevance of our chosen title today. But they haven't given up hope, right? Even though the handwriting's there, they're still putting forth an effort, like you said, to leverage and blackmail these governments that are inconvenient to their efforts to prosecute this war, and and their efforts to win the war, which is just not going to happen.
Yeah, but they're panicking, and as much as they can, they try to tighten their grip on not just public opinion, but the information space. I don't know if you guys saw, it's one of the clips where Hillary Clinton said, "I don't understand Americans who are sort of taking Putin's point of view, but we have to fight them. We have to crack down on them." There's a lot of that in Europe with the information space. Canada is apparently canceling any podcasts that don't go along with the narrative. And basically, that's their answer to everything. Because in Europe, what we have is Hungary, that now has basically a kind of an ally, which is Fico, opposite in politics, but saying, "Fuck this, I'm not going on with the Ukraine shit anymore." That's already two people. 2 weeks from now, there's elections in Poland, and Poland is the new chosen one for America. It was supposed to be the big ally for Zelensky, but the population is so against it, they had to revert to a lot of these. We're not sending guns anymore. We're not going to pay your refugees in Poland anymore. We've had enough of this. That's the messaging currently. And a lot of these Borrells, the Ursulas, they are in a panic. Borrell, just today, there's two things going on. There was the Warsaw Security Summit, which I got a little slide about because I thought it was very interesting to have this little handbook given to everybody. I'm going to share the screens once I've found the settings. There you see it. And yeah, it's all about, by the way, this was obviously for defense ministers' meetings. And it was all about, yes, we can get with the weapons, but on the same day, 4 or 5 things from the Telegraph, from CNN, from the BBC saying we're out. The NATO's top general, Admiral Rob Bauer, the NATO's top admiral, said we're seeing the bottom of the barrel when it comes to weapons. The new British guy says there's nothing we can send. We're just out. The Pentagon said, I mean, we are looking at the final strokes here. So this was one. And the second one, which began yesterday, was in Grenada, which is the European Political Community Summit. And that's where you go. Josip Borrell said, if the Americans stop their aid to Ukraine, there's no way we can replace it. We in Europe, we don't want this shit left in our lap, because 70-80% of all the aid that went to Ukraine was from you guys, not you guys, but your taxes. It was from Washington. And now they're saying, well, we were promised Moscow in 3 weeks, and now we're left with this crap. It's beginning to bite all over the place. You cannot not. I mean, we're united, more united than ever. Putin got more NATO than he ever would have believed. That's proven to be as false as there are no Nazis in Ukraine. It's just as empty.
There's still a tremendous propaganda machine to overcome. I was at a place the other day, and they had CNN on, and they were talking about the Leopard 2 tanks being a game changer in Ukraine.
Still,
they're burning as though they're brand new. They have, and then they had, this is what really got me. They had shots of destroyed Leopard 2 tanks, and they claimed that they were Russian tanks destroyed by Leopard 2 tanks. And I'm sitting there fuming, because that's the kind of lie they told. They've been telling since the beginning of time. That
sounds like CNN to me, but it also sounds like
it was so outrageous.
A telltale sign is the little iron cross that they inherited from the Nazis. That's usually on the
well, these are just blown to smithereens, but I'd already seen a month ago, or 2 months ago, I'd seen these tanks blown up by Russians. I mean, it's by the Russian team.
I was going to say that sounds typical of CNN's misrepresentation, but it also reminds me of the Voice of America, who did an article about the high-speed rail that China built in Indonesia. And they showed a picture of this
old rinky-dink
freight train instead of the actual high-speed rail. And then they were forced to correct it because a lot of viewers complained that, hey, that's deliberate misrepresentation with your photo there.
Yeah.
Because they really put a nice 400 kilometer per hour high-speed passenger and freight train system in place in Indonesia, and it went online, and it's tremendous and terrific. And that, yeah, VOA wanted to undermine it with this picture of this rinky-dink little freight train.
Yeah.
So what other images, Ben?
It got ripped apart as fast as Antony Blinken's revision of history, saying Babi Yar, the Soviets buried that history. They were very. I wanted to say something about public opinion, because the others, as I said, this is in Granada, Spain, and I just want you to take a look at how fucking empty this thing is. Okay, this is beggar meets traitor, which is Nikol Pashinyan, the one from Armenia, right?
Armenia, yeah.
Who abandoned Nagorno-Karabakh, and he one of his first phone calls before this meeting was between these two. Zelensky thanked him for something, and now he's ready to resign if that helps. And that brings to mind, one was what we recently talked about, that Sanna Marin, the dancing queen of Finland, who went right out of politics after she got her country into NATO and went into, oh Jesus, the fucking Yankee Blair's NGO. Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand, she had draconian laws on free speech and on, let's call it, lockdowns in New Zealand. Then she retired, and now she's in the British royal family's something with the ecology. Strike Earth Foundation. One of the princes did that, and this guy's ready to do the same. I think maybe Zelensky, hopefully, is ready to do the same. But yeah, we did what you wanted. Now let me get out with my money. But the emptiness. Yeah. I think is what's fascinating about this. I just saw the first shot. Sorry, I don't have any video of it, of the Valdai discussion forum going on in Sochi right now. Jesus, that's packed. It's like everybody in the world. It looks like everybody in the world is paying attention to what Putin has to say and his people.
Well, when you said Grenada, I was thinking Grenada,
No.
but it's Grenada, Spain, not Grenada.
Yes,
in
Spain.
In the Caribbean. So, but yeah, it's the polar shifts. It's the shifts away from unipolarism towards multipolarism that explains that.
Yeah, you can pretend for a while. We're all united. We got the money. We'll get through the winter. But sooner or later, that bill's coming due. And I'm thinking it's closer than most of these people think. That it really is closer.
Now, did you have another image? You want me
well, this is just an assortment of, you can bring it up if you want, because the top left I put through machine translation, which is wonderful. It's a change.org Ukrainian version, petition. And they would like Warner Brothers Studios to remove the Z from Harry Potter's forehead and turn it into either just a spark or maybe free, which is the Ukrainian trizub for the university, because they don't want their children to see this sign of Russian aggression. Below that, what you see is Wall Street Journal, saying, well, if you cut off Ukraine, basically the firefighters, the teachers, all the public services, they're not going to get paid, which I'm sure will go well. So in the meantime, they're increasing the defense spending, okay? While we're running out of them, whose money, whose weapons, whose army are you going to do this big breakthrough to take Crimea and all that with? I'm just thinking that's why the writing's on the wall to everybody with a brain, I think.
So the U.S. is kind of threatening, leveraging the fact that the U.S. taxpayers are paying all the municipal and government employees in Ukraine, and if we cut that funding, what is that going to mean? That's probably going to mean a lot more immigration towards Western Europe, and so we're kind of warning Western Europe, hey, you guys need to maybe, increase a higher share of the burden and start, shouldering more of the burden, or things might not go well for go even worse, I should say, for your economy. So that's kind of a game that's being played by the U.S.
Yeah, and the U.S. captured side of the EU also wants not just Ukraine, but Moldova, at least 3 or 4 new countries into the EU as soon as possible, preferably before the end of the year. But then Charles Michel, he's the big guy in the EU, said, no, everybody knows it's corrupt as fuck. We cannot keep these promises. These are silly, stupid promises. It's irresponsible to make them because it will be a burden to everybody, including every member country. It's going to cost a lot. So there's huge divisions, not just within the European things. But I also want to mention, Carlo, this thing where Biden said that we will find out. He used the exact phrase he used for Nord Stream. He said, we will find alternative means to fund Ukraine. It's like, well, we have a way of getting it done. Don't you worry.
Sure.
Even if
That's Obama
Congress.
quote?
That's from Biden. That's from Biden and via Reuters. Yeah, he didn't explain those alternate means, but he said we have alternate means to fund Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean the intelligence services. I mean, you not only have the CIA, but you have the ONI and the DIA, and there's 13 of them, basically 13 intelligence services. I think that's the number, 12, 13. That you can scrape 35 billion together handily. I mean, obviously, I have no proof of this, but I guarantee you that the CIA is getting a taste from the fentanyl money. All you have to do is look at once again at the pattern that Gary Webb elucidated through Freeway Ricky Ross of the Colombia smuggling crack cocaine into Los Angeles and other major cities in the country, and the CIA made a fortune off of that. So
there's probably internal fortunes there, but how does that go when we see this comes from Yellen's office, which is the Treasury, that the US, basically the national debt has increased in 24 hours, exactly the same, even more, $270 billion is more than the total debt of the Russian Federation. That's 24 hours. That's like a spike going like absolutely vertical. How does that work, and how does that last forever? Europe can't do that, but apparently America still can. But for how long?
They can print money because they still operate under the petrodollar, and
but everybody's buying above the G8, what do you call it, the price ceiling that they set for Russian oil, which is $60. India is buying it for $80 apparently, according to.
Yeah, I saw the Russia's selling it for $80 too. I guess to India, which is reselling it to the West.
Yeah, that's what we're buying in Europe.
Yeah. So I keep going back to the Wayback Machine, okay? And what fueled and we'll talk about populism, and what really turned the tide among the U.S. population during the Vietnam War was the draft. That's pretty clear to me. All we have now with Ukraine is the economy, and that's a more difficult a bugaboo to negotiate, because some people it's not affecting at all. A lot of people are actually profiting from it, and of course a lot of people are suffering. There was a new poll where 4 out of 5, I think, younger Americans, I don't know, under the age of 25, felt like they would never own a home, which is like
80%,
the benchmark in this country. So, but it's still a harder thing to sell.
Similar statistics in Canada right now. They just came out. Yeah.
So that I don't know how bad the economy would have to get before you start to get big protests in the streets.
Tell me if you've heard this, because that's where we get the, obviously Lindsey Graham is a big one, but the other is the other Ben, not the British Ben, but Ben Hodges. He's the NATO American guy, right?
Yeah.
He keeps saying this, that for 5% of the US budget, we have destroyed 50% of the Russian thing. That is the new talking point. That's what they're saying. And apparently at this defense conference, I think the Dutch defense minister said, and I had to watch the video because I had to find the original, saying it's the cheapest way to stop Russia from being a threat to NATO. They really see it as ones and zeros, as numbers. But that 50% for 5%, that's making the rounds. That's everywhere. And our Scott Ritter, that's just so far away from the truth, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's a good advertising talking point, but it has no relationship to actual reality.
Yeah, none whatsoever. They're testing new field weapons that they don't need in Ukraine. That's what they're doing. I mean, they've all admitted, they're actually churning out. Their industrial average for weapons is more than what we can do in 2 years. The collective West combined. People have been saying that for a year, but they were called Putinists. Finally. They're talking about this now. Sorry.
Looking at the big picture when it comes to weapons, as we've stated before, Russia spends 10% of what America spends on defense.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And has gotten so much more bang for the buck. What does that tell you about the immorality the immorality of the capitalist system in this country. I mean, it's just it's just theft, pure and simple theft, and putting people's lives at risk. Uh, just Ben, I know you're fascinated by the number of drug addicts in the
I am.
Kensington section of Philadelphia and all over this country. People living under bridges. It's horrific. And of course, Billy Bob in California, the situation is 10 times worse than a lot of countries because states, because of the climate. Yet this guy who's running the state is probably will be the replacement for Biden as the presidential candidate.
Wait, who's that? Who's the Canada? Probably
Newsom.
more liberal than thou, but what's it? Who is he?
Gavin Newsom. He's the governor
Gavin Newsom. I
of
heard the name.
Yeah.
California.
He's done a great old job in California, hasn't he? I've seen the videos. Someone taking a bike, and it takes 20 minutes just getting around the 10 cities. And there's Disneyland in the background somewhere. It's just amazing.
So, you're talking about capitalism, Carlo, and certainly there's an immorality there. But really, I mean, what I thought of when you were talking about that was the inefficiency, right? The inefficiency of capitalism and how it's so inefficient because so much of it gets extracted in profits and corruption. And so, the Russia doesn't have that issue because they have a state-owned, for the most part, it's a state-owned defense, industrial capacity. Whereas in the U.S., they champion private military companies, private contractors, and it's so wasteful. And they have these big, huge, expensive multi-billion-dollar programs that end up with the F-35 that goes off on a flight and then the pilot ejects and they lose the. So it's
there's
just
so many of those great videos.
Yeah.
The crux of that is that so lost my train again. Never mind. Go ahead, guys.
Okay, the immorality comes in when we're talking about the motivation and the policies. Right. What kind of policies are we going to have to get our profits? That's where the immorality comes in. But you remembered your thought. Go ahead.
Yes, all I wanted to say was, you need 155 millimeter shells. Show me the money. Show me the money. I got to build the plant. I don't have the plant because.
And that's not usually profitable. We don't know how long this is going to last. We're not going to build up, 2 million capacity. What we want is big R&D, big flashy presentational stuff that costs billions.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you watch the B2? There's a new B2Z or something, a B2 bomber, and it was like a Tesla presentation. Big steam. There's the curtains go on, and then it just said the title and over. And that was it. No specifications, no test flights. That is the way the American industrial complex works. It'll probably be available in 20 years or something, but that's all it was, the announcement. Yeah. Not Base Systems. Base System is British, but I think it was a Lockheed one.
And you can get away with that, and when you're dealing with Iraq or trying to overthrow Libya, but when you're facing Russia or China or Russia and China, that's not going to be anything that's going to work. So,
the PLA is putting out such videos right now. I wish I had one queued up, but I didn't have it in the clips. But if you want to bring in the slide, I want to make this understandable to people because this was 30 years ago to the day. Right now, there's things going on, but that is Yeltsin opening fire on what is the White House in Moscow, the parliament. Because what did the US do? Basically a defeated Soviet Union by illegal means. They bragged about it. The secret story of how Americans helped Yeltsin get into power, which was, we talked about a children's, birthday. In Hungary in 1990, the really rich families went to McDonald's to get a little King's Crown for the kid and something special like, what is an average Happy Meal now, because it was a sign of status. It was an expensive thing, and the same thing happened in Moscow in that era. That was a humiliated, defeated nation that has been attacked ever since ancient, for 1,000 years, of course, but since the days of the Soviet Union, 1920, always constantly under attack. Okay, next, what we know is life expectancy shrunk. Millions of people died during peacetime. But then Vladimir Putin came along, and there was the Chechnya, the Georgian and the Chechnyan conflicts, and they almost didn't make it out. Even the armed forces of Russia were demoralized. Like, shit, we barely got through that, and we were the mightiest on earth 20 years ago. And from that, they built up something, always expecting to be under attack. That is what Putin opened with at the Vardai discussion course, that we were the largest country on earth. We do not need new territory. What we are doing is finishing a war that the West started on us 10 years ago. And even before that, I think they were preparing. And that's why they have, I mean, people, I get shit for this because of course it's not the Soviet Union, not in a million ways, but things don't change from one system to the other very closely. I mean, what did they do when the Nazis attacked 1942? You're going to make fucking steel, like tons of it. And you're going to make the cheap old usable T-72. And you're going to make so many that we're going to go to fucking Berlin. And that's what they did. You don't fuck with these people, because that's exactly what they're doing now. I don't care about your profit margins. What I need you to tell me is the production lines, the efficiency, and let's go. Was it that let's go, the word of Yuri Gagarin just before he went up to space? Yeah. I wonder if it's Davai or the other one, but it was Let's Go. There was a movie like that.
And just the opposite happened in the United States, because the United States
you got comfy
up its war machine for World War II, and then by the time Eisenhower left office, he was warning about the military-industrial complex, and what he's basically talking about is what we've been talking about: weapon systems that are useless in a practical battlefield, and the amount of money that they were ripping off from the American public. But you know, the difference between all these other wars we're talking about and this one is the United States has found an idiotic proxy, and that's huge.
With more deaths than British in World War II or American in World War II currently.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Only 400,000 fatalities on the American side. And I don't want to. The 27 million on the Russian side.
Yeah, they
Soviet
found
side.
Yes.
So, but the proxy thing is a problem. Go ahead, Billy Bob.
Well, I had a thought, and then that last comment just ran it out of my mind.
Oh,
we were talking about
the military-industrial complexes of the different countries, but that last thought also gave me some shivers. But go on. Okay, I wanted to say, this is, you can think about it in the meantime. This is unsourced. I didn't put it into the cheat sheet because it was from a Belarusian Telegram channel, and I didn't find any real evidence for it. But apparently, who's the CEO of BlackRock, that guy?
Larry Fink or something?
Larry Fink, yeah. Apparently, he complained in some sort of private capacity to Zelensky that they're building too many cemeteries on arable, valuable soil, and he'll send them, means to burn or biodegrade the dead people. Just don't. It's the quote was, "It's not just your land anymore." I treat it with a pinch of salt, at least, as rumor.
No, that's interesting.
Holy shit! It sounds believable to me.
Yeah, sounds believable. I was gonna just mention, you mentioned the Valdai Discussion Club, and I guess that's convened today. And Putin, I think as we speak, maybe or a little bit earlier, was giving a speech there.
Yeah. He landed about 2 hours ago, I think, before we started in Sochi. Yeah.
And I know, didn't we have a guest on, Alan? Alan went to the last one, or the one before the last one, as I recall. We had a guest on our program. I think he's the partner of Radhika Desai.
But I remember.
Oh, right.
I forget Alan's last name.
Me too.
But he was one of the few Americans that were actually attending the Valdai Discussion Club. So maybe he went, and we can have him back and we can discuss it. But
if someone's watching who was there, I mean, my dream is Pepe Escobar not speaking against Alan, but he's there or in Sochi. My God, that would be amazing to get the inside take.
So one of the Ben mentioned earlier, one of the headlines from a couple hours ago from Putin's speech was just addressing the Western narrative that Russia is involved in a war of expansion and trying to recreate the Soviet Union. And so he just spoke explicitly to that narrative, and he said Russia is the biggest country in the world. We are not engaged in any kind of expansionism.
Yeah, he didn't say, but we can add it's very well endowed with resources. Seriously, it is.
Yeah.
Plus, it has China right next to it.
Yeah.
The manufacturer of the world, absolutely. Sorry, I derailed your train again, didn't I?
No, that was about it. I was done. But
It's the mistress again.
she always calls at the most inconvenient times, Carlo.
No,
It's all-
that was somebody calling. She picked it up downstairs.
That was
in
your
her-
daughter. I understand, Carlo. Whatever you say, sir.
Yeah.
Look, we're living across, I think, a huge, what did they called it before? It was the Brian Beletic show, inflection point. I mean, the French are currently fucking off from Niger this week. This is confirmed by both sides, okay? This thing in Ukraine is getting close to collapse, both on the military and the economic front. We are all looking at, if not a depression, but serious recession possibilities, and the winter is just about to begin. That's my feeling of the post. I mean, the one thing I put into the cheat sheet, which I can bring up on the screen, is everybody's favorite Michael McFall, the Fall Guy. And tell me,
there we go. Oh, there we go.
If that's not desperation, then what is? I mean, that is just, you can't stop the gravy train, you can't stop the weapons, you can't stop. It's going to be terrible because everybody, especially the population, is talking about stop, end, we're done. That's a signal to me.
Where do you think he's coming from on that? Like, what do you think he really believes? I mean, is he just saying that because he knows that if the weapons stop, that Ukraine is going to have no choice but to negotiate an end? I think that's what it is.
I think so. And that end could actually bring peace to Europe, the one that he and his ilk were very afraid of, where Germany once again gets along with Russia and put this episode behind. You know, a continent can come together, and then the US has zero say in the world. I mean, they've got it up from Modi right now. They've got plans in the Caucasian things. You know, obviously, Georgia came out saying we just stopped the color revolution, which was one of these Soros think tanky things, Canvas, I think, that wanted to do violence. That didn't work. They're still stirring the pot in Kosovo, unfortunately, but they lost a lot of territory. Africa is gone. Hello, Carlos. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They robbed it blind, accumulate. It was a horrific time, and that was the plan. I think 2 years ago, that was the plan. In a couple of weeks, we're going to sanction it to hell. Putin's going to be out. Maidan 2.0. We get all those beautiful, rich resources: the land, the energy, the wheat, the fertilizer. That's all going to be spread out in the little guys in Europe, and especially us. That's ours. That's
so it's projection. The West is projecting onto Russia, you know, and claiming Russia is engaged in a war of aggression to accumulate resources, and that's exactly what the West is doing. That's why NATO was expanding all the way into Ukraine, and Russia's it's a war of self-defense against, you know, Western aggression and Western efforts to dominate those resources. A lot of resources, like Putin.
And a lot of the leaders, the sane leaders around the world, are paying close attention. They know what's going on. And some of these stooges, like Ursula, who never saw an election in her life, the same as Borrell, they are acting defensive, preemptive. I mean, I think Borrell said at the beginning of his speech, I'm very uncomfortable with even some of my friends bringing up this history of NATO and Russia. I mean, that's history, and forget it. It was something, I'm paraphrasing, but along those lines. He's got friends telling him the reality. They're very, very defensive. All of that facade, that beautiful, the latest was basically Russia and the Soviet Union was Hitler, trying to switch that around, which is one way to absolutely anger the Russians. That was for the population. The population is not going along with it, which is wonderful.
Well, I thought one of the most
of the population, yeah.
I thought one of the most interesting facts you put on the cheat sheet this week was the fact that if Ukraine were to join NATO, the NATO countries would owe Ukraine $375 billion. Was that the right figure? Something like that.
Let's actually find it.
$365 billion.
Well, that's the EU. I'm not sure about the NATO.
The EU.
But yeah. I mean, a couple of numbers. But by the way, Hungary got this 13 billion, the little euro thing that they owed us for 4 years. We finally received it in exchange for something, whatever. And then they're talking about if they join EU, then Kiev would receive 186 billions over 7 years. And the second headline, which comes from The Guardian, is adding 9 countries to the EU will cost existing members 250 billion plus, more than 250 billion. So recipients will turn into contributors. So it's going to bankrupt the whole thing. That's why ever since this was brought up that by Christmas we should talk about Ukraine joining, I'm saying do it. Do it fucking today. It will rip this thing apart finally, and NATO. So do it. Do it. Add it to both. That's what I'd say. I'm for it.
Except for Washington, those are big numbers.
Oh yeah, I mean for them it's just a check on a Friday.
Yeah, right.
For
Print it out. Go to the Treasury Department and get them to print it.
Did we talk about the? I think we did, right? We talked about the exorbitant amount of money that was just created out of thin air by the U.S. that matched the entire debt of the state of Russia. And we did that in 24 hours. We talked about that earlier, right?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned on the show that I follow a couple of these Wall Street financial type accounts and magazines, but they keep saying line going vertically up into the sky, bad news. But I don't quite understand what's behind it. But they're all sounding the alarm on the debt, the incredible bursting up of the debt.
Yeah, because it seems counterintuitive that you can just print so many trillions, right? So, I mean, we've printed infinitely more money into existence that has ever existed in the past, and we've just created it. And how do we use that money? Like, is that money being used to benefit, ordinary people, even Americans, or humanity, other countries? No, that money is being focused into projects that benefit the wealthy elite minority that is the ruling class in the West. It's to prosecute war, to defeat their ideological enemies, to defeat their those countries like Russia and China that are inconvenient to their imperialism. We have another comment from Mr.
Yeah, and
Carlo.
don't forget speculation, because a lot of it goes into basically betting on what they call futures, which is a casino. Is the line going up or down? I'm going to bet big on it. That's the derivatives market, as I understand it. As I said, poor understanding.
Yeah, it props up the system. So that money goes in propping up the banks, privately owned banks, I might add, not state-owned banks. And a system that is there to benefit the interests of private capital to the detriment of the vast majority.
Carlos, you're right, but it's not one of those weird coincidences in history. It is the industrialized area that the Soviet Union built up, with massive iron factories, massive power plants, everything you can imagine. The rest, the west of what you call Ukraine now, was Eastern Poland. Basically, it was always just flat land with a couple of cities, not even a lot of arable land. So yeah, the southwest, the 4 oblasts in Russia, which all 3 heads, which is Medvedev, Shoigu, and Gerasimov, said there's going to be more because the West is just unable to get into proper negotiations. Well, then that's the end of Ukraine. There's going to be more Russian oblasts.
And I remember, for decades, I would hear that, Putin is a corrupt oligarch and he is the richest man in the world. Yeah, so, I mean, to if you're going to take that at face value, I don't think he really, if he's already the richest man in the world, why does he care about stealing the Ukrainian?
Also look into how they they calculate that. I think I did this 5 years ago, and Gazprom, Rosneft, the big energy companies, they count that as his private property.
That's all they do.
That's how he's a big oligarch.
Preposterous. So Poland, Mr. Carla, did you have something?
No, go ahead, Billy.
I was just going to say, we talked about the Polish change in rhetoric, being anti-Ukrainian and being, hey, we can't support this offensive forever. There's a change there. But again, I'm a little cynical. We're coming up to an election, and that could be populist rhetoric to get, popularity and to get people to vote for the incumbent. And then after the election, he's just going to change his spots and do what he's been doing this whole time.
Probably right.
I think I'm a little bit cynical, but I do like to hear it. I mean, I like to see the anti-Ukraine,
me too.
Anti-Ukraine war rhetoric.
It might have been token symbolism, but to a lot of the people, it means a lot that Yaroslav Hunka, the SS guy in the parliament, the first official was the ambassador, the Polish ambassador to Canada, who said, I want to extradite that guy. We want to launch an investigation into him. To a lot of people, that means a lot. So even if it's just we're going to do something that's popular with the people, I think they kind of opened, they let the genie out of the bottle. showing
that was my favorite mess up by the West for a long time, and we're still gonna hit that one home for weeks to come because
do you know what Justin Trudeau said when some MP asked him, when are you going to list all the ex-Nazis in this is the Toronto Sun in Canada? He said, you understand it's not the right time for this. It's just not the right time to list all the Nazis in Canada.
I do want to back up and comment on what Carlos said. Clearly the impulse for Russia going into Ukraine was not to enrich Putin or to even to enhance his political future because he brought all this extra wealth in. We've already stated how many goddamn motherfucking times that Russia has all the natural resources it needs, and it has a long border with China that has all the technological knowledge to take those resources and make them into useful products for people. That period. They don't need Eastern Ukraine. They were there to save the people of Eastern Ukraine. You think the number of people who have died in this war? Think about how many. There were 2.5 million Russian speakers in Eastern Ukraine. 2 million had already left. Most fled to Russia. When the Azov Battalion and their Nazis, after the Maidan coup of 2014, started to murder these people, the Russian-speaking people, there was 2.5 million people in danger of being slaughtered by Nazis. So I don't want to hear this shit. Putin, if anything, the Russian people feel like Putin stepped in too fucking late.
He even admitted as much, and I like your lie and Scott Ritter's side. I agree with you entirely.
Well, Scott and I have the same. We're on the same page with the Nazis.
So right. Absolutely.
So anyway.
We actually we are going to have Scott on Tuesday. He's confirmed that he's going to join us on Tuesday. I'll also have Ian Comer, so that'll be a great show. And we like to see Scott riled up, just like we like to see Carlo riled up. Thanks, Carlo.
No problem.
But we're gonna definitely do our best to rile Scott up on next Tuesday.
Looking at just a bit of history helps you get riled up because then you understand what's going
on. We could probably start winding down. Let's see what Carlos had a response. After the war is done, Europe will finally find itself at the mercy of Russia if that pipeline through Niger is delayed. Weakening Ukraine is still a way to stop future wars.
Oh, that's not what Ursula said at this fucking European political meeting. She said that Russia's energy blackmail turned into nothing, turned into an empty threat. We did that. We're proud of it. So I guess either she's right or you're right.
If he's talking about the Niger, Algeria pipeline, it's only going to supply 4% of the liquid natural gas that Europe needs annually. So yes, that's a red herring. I don't want to hear this shit.
Maybe Carlos is happy that the Nord Stream got blown up and we pay 7 to 8 times the price for dirty American LNG at this moment just to heat the fucking homes in winter. That's a wonderful deal. Europe.
He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's one of these people that wants to find the minutiae to shoot down everybody, shoot down reality. Well, fucking don't shoot down reality because that's what you rely on. What are you breathing now? You're not breathing carbon dioxide, you're breathing oxygen. You can't turn that shit on its head. It's scientific fact. It's as close to the historical fact, as close to scientific fact as you're ever fucking gonna find. Jesus Christ.
Well, we got the riled up Carlo. One of the Carlos I love the best in the world.
Sorry. No, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry.
Yeah, by the way, everybody watching, we're probably in a week or two, we're going to set it up so we have Tuesday and Friday shows because there's not a lot of news between the two shows right now. We're kind of running out at this moment, but
we did get through an hour. Yeah, but no. So Ben makes the point that we have having a Tuesday and then a follow-up show on Thursday. Sometimes there's not a lot of material that just happens in the one day to really discuss. But uh, we appreciate the comments. So don't take it personally. We like to
No,
hear
take it
opposing views
personally.
because it livens up the discussion. So Carlos, we appreciate your opposing views for that reason, even though we don't necessarily agree with them.
I want to point out something that Garland Nixon said too on a recent with Danny Haiphong show. He pointed out that why would NATO, if it's under any threat from Russia, be giving up all of its weapons to make itself more vulnerable? If the leaders of the NATO and European Union really felt that they were under any goddamn threat, why would they give up all their weapons? They'd be building up their weapons.
Really good point.
But they're not. And as Garland said, Russia's doing exactly the opposite. It's girding for an invasion from the West. That's what this buildup is all about. Partially all about. It may, there may be an offensive, but the thing is to keep their existential. It's existential for them and to keep that position going. So all of these arguments that you want to play on Russia and this celebrity
it's total projection
journalism, like by blaming Putin like he's some almighty God who doesn't answer to other people. He does. He has other people all around him that he discusses all of these things with in depth. He's not the ninnies that the West put in power. He's just not those kind of stupid people. Look at the United States, for Christ's sake. Joe Biden and Donald Trump, give me a fucking break.
That's the elite of the elite, the creme de la creme. It doesn't get any better than leaders like that.
I love the fact that Condoleezza Rice was on stage at some event or the other, and he called Putin a murderous thug. Gerasimov's an idiot. Shoigu is Gerasimov's a drunk. Shoigu's an absolute idiot, and he picked up a third. This is the chick who worked under fucking W. Bush and launched the war.
Her husband W. Bush.
What the hell? And he called the entire Russian leadership idiots and drunks. It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's absolutely amazing.
Really, what a clown show.
Yeah. So it's projection, Carlos. So you were just talking about the Western narrative that Russia is an expansionist, aggressive power. That is sheer projection. And the West knows it, because the West, like you said, they're not developing their military. They're giving all their military to Ukraine in a proxy war. They're not worried about Russia marching into Germany or Western Europe, because if they were, they'd be behaving differently. Russia is worried about NATO, escalating this war, so they're building up their defensive military capabilities. But it's not going good for the West.
No, and the way the rhetoric is going, I'm thinking maybe Russia is going to look for Lebensraum in about a week or two. I think that's going to be the thing. The revisionism of World War II.
The new Western talking point.
But I think it's coming back. It looks that way. Yeah.
Okay, so we have Dust James, a friend of the show. Thanks for watching, Dust. Russophobia is toxic. That's a great point. Yeah, so that's totally possible, Carlos.
All good, Carlos. That happens.
If there's some misunderstanding, thanks anyway for getting Carlo riled up, because we appreciate that. Do we want to discuss any other topics, or do we want to go ahead and start our preparation for our big Tuesday program?
I was just looking at, I think we've had enough, unless we want to look at Condi Rice or the German protests, which are enormous. Maybe it's time to
Condi had some great clips. If we can pull up a clip of her calling them psychopathic drunks.
I think that's worth the watch, especially, because Dust and Carlos would maybe enjoy it. So I'll bring it up on screen in just a second.
Okay. Yeah, I watched her words, and that was exactly what she had said, and it was.
What I have to do, unfortunately, is stop sharing.
Laughable.
I have to stop sharing and share. right? With sound, that's an important thing to share
Okay.
system audio. And then I can do this. And I'm not going to go full screen. Let me know if you hear that.
Should I put it up?
The
I'll put it up.
underlying
Do you hear it?
circumstances
Yeah.
trying to supplant the United States in the Indo-Pacific in particular, and perhaps globally,
3
continues
minutes, but
to
worth it.
dominate Chinese foreign policy. So you have a declining power in Russia that's disrupted the system through a war in Europe that nobody ever thought we'd see another ground war in Europe. You have a rising power
Well, they
or a
warned you.
weakened power in China that's disrupting the system because it's kind of not playing by the rules that we thought it would play by.
They're not pursuing
And
private
so
profit.
all of a sudden, the United States finds itself with rivals. Now, let me say just one word about the relationship between the two of them, because
She
thinks
the alliance is ephemeral. It's not real.
The relationship without limits between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, the bromance between these two authoritarians. So let's start with the fundamentals. This is an anti-American, anti-Western axis, is what it is.
That's true.
It has very little in shared beliefs, values, except that the West is decadent and civilization needs to be saved by China and Russia. It has
So far, really good.
very little in common except that it's both a revanchist China, the restoration of China, of which Taiwan is, of course, the last piece. Russia, the restoration of the Russian Empire, so it's kind of 19th century in both cases. But nothing that binds them culturally. In fact, there are no more xenophobic people in the world about Asians than the Russians. And
Right.
so the underlying of this is
What a ninny.
somewhat weak. So what you're talking about, though, is that there's some benefit to being able to jointly deal with the United States. But here's the problem. If you're Xi Jinping and at the Olympics, so let me tell you, I think I know how that conversation went at the Olympics. I've got to do this thing in Ukraine. It'll take 5 or 6 days. You know what
That comes from Millie, by the way, the 5 or 6 days.
it's like because you've got Taiwan.
Not from Putin.
Fine.
Yeah.
Just don't do it until the Olympics are over. I think that was the conversation between them.
And here comes
And now Xi Jinping finds himself wedded to a homicidal maniac who's launched a war in Europe, sanctions all over the place, and oh, by the way, who can't even control his own government and the crazy people around him. By the way, I know those people around him. So I've never met Prigozhin, although
he fit right
I've seen
in there.
dinners which he apparently catered. He's just evil.
He's evil.
Then there's Patrushev, who's evil and
Intelligence
kinda
master.
stupid,
Evil and stupid.
according to most people, sort of tied to the Chinese because that's how he made his wealth. And then there's the defense minister Shoigu, who is just an idiot. All right, I spent a lot of time with him. He's really an idiot. And then you have Gerasimov, who apparently just drinks a lot. So it's not a particularly inspiring group around Vladimir Putin.
I think that's enough of that, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the woman who was under a guy that now paints his dog.
I thought was the stupidest president ever before.
Yeah,
the newest one came
not
along.
to mention and she took part in invading a country on the premise that it was involved in 911 when they all knew it wasn't. And at that time she shook the whole time. I noticed, and then she sits down at the piano and pollutes Brahms. What a ninny. She knows nothing.
Thing is, she's in the 1990s when Russia was basically a failed state. That's where these people are. There's drunks, there's idiots. It's a gas station with nukes. Things come to mind. They really are stuck there. Like Timothy Snyder, the Yale historian, one of these anti-Soviet. Everything Russian is evil. Everyone is there is a drunk and a corrupt idiot. That's the world that inherits their mind. That was a big fucking mistake.
The Yeltsin era is over. Somebody should tell them.
Yeah, and right now they run into a problem. They're used to getting away. We throw money at it, it gets sold. No fucking money in the world is solving this problem for you. That's the war they run into. That's the Russian armed forces.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those pejoratives aren't gonna fix the situation, Condi. I like when she accidentally called George Bush her husband. That was a telling
funny.
Freudian slip.
Well, you know, it's very interesting because at the time I was doing a blog and I wrote a one-act play where, you know, there were rumors that they were intimate, Bush Jr. and Condoleezza Rice, and I wrote a one-act play where they spend a weekend in a motel room somewhere in the South, just fucking each other, and I think it was just about, it was, you know, it was, that's the intellectual level that I saw them on at that point. Now maybe I was being too easy on them, apparently, after what she just said, which was just
viewers are going to be searching for that play. They're going to be scouring Google trying to find that play.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
W and Condi fucking each other in a southern motel.
It got taken down.
Okay.
Well, there goes our monetization.
All right, guys. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I hate to rush us off, but
hopefully we left you with something to laugh at.
Yeah, Condi Rice. Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much, Carlo. Thanks everybody for watching. Scott Ritter on Tuesday. Check us out.
Yep. Bye.